Welcome to Nacht Waffen Pilot with Penny Bradley. Today my guest is Eric Hecker, and he and I are actually real-world friends. He paid for my partner Lou and I to spend a week at his place with he and his lady last month. And during this process, I got to see his personal library, which I was quite impressed with, and had reams of documents he's printed out in my hands. And for those who have doubts about him, I have had my hands on his DD-214 and on pay stubs from when he was in Antarctica. So, he's the real deal. In fact, in ufology and SSP communities, having that DD-214 makes him the gold standard. So, saying this, my friend Eric has done a lot of research into the weirdnesses and secret things that have gone on his home turf of Long Island, and that's what we're here to talk about today, are all of those things. So, Eric, you want to start with where you want to start with this?
Certainly. First and foremost, thank you very much for having me. It's nice to talk since you were here. I know you've been very busy, like a mover and shaker, making things happen. And I got a couple of things going on over here, so it's nice to have some time again.
It is.
But as far as the conversation for today and where to start, I think we can go way back to the Revolutionary War, because today, being August 22nd, was the start of the Battle for Long Island, also known as the Battle of Brooklyn. And basically, it happened August 22nd in 1776, and it was the first military engagement since the announcement, the Declaration of Independence. So they basically went from paper to fisticuffs on Long Island. That's where it started. Now,
Wow, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. So it's a very apropos day that we're having this conversation. But I would just say that a lot of folks should really look into the history of Long Island, because it goes at the very least back that far to the time of the Revolutionary War as far as the colonists were concerned. But Montauk specifically has a very ancient history that a lot of people aren't aware of. Now, George Washington, when he first stepped foot on Montauk Point in the late 1700s, he commissioned a lighthouse to be built almost post haste, and that's the famous Montauk Point lighthouse that a lot of us Long Islanders are very familiar with. And there's a term that you might see very interesting. All Long Islanders refer to Montauk as one thing. It's referred to as the end. That's it. It's just called the end. And it's just interesting to me, this whole alpha omega type situation. And here we have Montauk right there, which is the end. I mean, there's bumper stickers for decades that's what it's called. But
The end.
yes.
I didn't know it was called that. Now, I was there in 1962 for about 6 months, but I was brought in a car at night. I left in a car at night, and never was real sure where it was geographically. But I know the place was hell on earth for me.
Yeah, understood. But I've been doing research and finding that the area now known as Nassau County, Long Island, which is a large tract of land, was previously just referred to as the town of Hempstead. And that area was pretty much a hot pot for all the discontent of what was going on at the time. And then there was a split that occurred. And that dividing line became the town of North Hempstead, which was the northern portion of that county, and then the remainder just being Hempstead proper. In the town of North Hempstead is an area known as Roslyn. And I would suggest that North Hempstead and Roslyn proper have been for a very long time the hub of the intel community in this nation. And that there's probably a good reason why the British tried attacking Long Island as their first military action. And then you can follow through and see that, yes, Washington basically skedaddled and got immediately off of Long Island. But some say that that was purposeful to draw them off. It was tactical. Let them think that there's nothing going on there now if that maneuver occurred. So the spy rings on Long Island, I think, have been documented pretty well, and a lot of people are somewhat familiar with them. But I don't think they have a deep understanding of how intense things got, or were, or still are. I mean, Long Island is still a hotbed of some serious activity going on.
Now, when we were talking prior, you mentioned that there was a facility that was so obviously CIA, and that it created a local parking problem.
Yes, that was in Roslyn. That was part of the information that I had gleaned through the Freedom of Information requests off of their site. That there was actually so much activity, and I'm very familiar with the town, and it's a beautiful, quaint, small little town, tiny streets. Yeah, you know what? They have a serious parking problem. If you're going to bring a corporation in there and flood that little village with personnel, you're going to have a parking problem. So there you go. There's a paper trail in the CIA for the fact that they had too many personnel to park. So they were looking into options and subcontractors and whatever they had to do. But these are the paper trails that get left, silly little details that a lot of folks don't pay attention to. Because you know what? They never hung out in Roslyn, Long Island, I guess.
Well, until you brought up about water bills, I would never have thought about that one either.
Yes. That was a fantastic find that at one point in time I found myself as a resident of Suffolk County, Long Island. And the water authorities were required to do annual testing and present that information to the people. And in that, I found that for a time period, Camp Hero, which is the location that the Montauk project occurred on, had a water tower, meters, distribution centers, pumps, and all kinds of stats that could be tracked and followed. And I started to pay attention to what was going on with the Camp Hero Water District. And it turned out it was a bunch of shenanigans, and they have more water available to nothing. They have more water available to meet the needs of a large city, but there's nothing going on there. And all they have to do is
officially isn't Camp Hero closed?
It's officially now just a state park that the top 10 feet has been donated to the New York State Parks Department. I believe it was in the early 90s. And at the original transfer, even though the Parks Department owned it and the citizens were now paying the taxes to maintain it through the state like that, you still weren't allowed on the park. And that was just the top 10 feet. And it was stated very clearly in their paperwork that everything 10 feet and below was still completely being utilized by the federal government and was hands off. And that was the time period that people who attempted to go to that park were chased off by armed guards, not wearing uniforms but carrying fully automatic weapons. But since then, they have
the same thing at Area 51.
Right.
Armed guards not wearing uniforms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this is serious. Mm-hmm. This is serious stuff, and yes, you can be shot by these people.
And lest we forget, the programs that were also going on Long Island were these STARGATE and Monroe Institute projects through the schooling institutions on Long Island. So there were some really nefarious CIA programs that, we now know they exist. We know they function somewhere, and I'm finding a paper trail that shows that it was in, at the very least, my community, and I can't imagine why they wouldn't have been doing it in others in proximity.
Did you want to talk about your personal involvement with that?
Oh, sure. When I was in elementary school, I got pulled out of class very regularly and was brought into the library and was a participant in the Monroe Institute remote viewing training practices that were being utilized by the CIA in that time period. I mean, the paperwork shows that's exactly what they were doing. Those are the programs that they were functioning in. And now I'm learning after the fact by looking into these programs and what their contents are and finding that I've already done all of these things. They're, I remember doing
That's always a shock.
Yeah, I mean, it blew my mind when I was just trying to, elevate myself and my mind and where I was. And I started looking into these programs, and then I started basically participating in them and having recollections of doing them before and like verbatim. So
I was from before that time period, so I don't know what the Monroe Institute was doing particularly, only that they were drawing in young people and basically screening for Project Stargate.
That is correct.
And its later iterations.
Correct.
Because for the audience, these programs change their names every 8 to 12 years. They change who funds them. It's just like a find the ball under the cup game. And it's designed to distract people from what's actually going on. Project Stargate was a major program that the CIA used to actually raise money from other agencies, because they had these people who could remote view and had 90% accuracy on an ongoing basis. This is the program that the movie Men Who Stare at Goats was based on. And the movie makes fun of it, but the results were accurate, verifiable, and the CIA made so much money at it that some of these agencies produced their own similar groups, so they didn't have to pay the CIA anymore. And now every major military group, especially if they're in combat, has remote viewers embedded in their units. It's always a good idea if you're behind a wall or a ridge to know what's on the other side when you come out. So this was an ongoing project since the 50s. Ingo Swann is the most famous person who was involved in it, and he had a book out, and I just blanked on the name.
There was Ingo Swann, there was Russell Targ, there was also Paul Smith. There's a whole bunch of people that were in these programs that have spoken about it. There's people in these programs that are still providing these services, like you just said. This is a known thing now. I apologize that a lot of the world is not privy to what's been happening, but this is the state of the union. You can hire these guys; they will provide these services. You can still go to the Monroe Institute and take the same courses that I was trained in. They still offer them.
And how old were you when you were trained in them?
It would have been all of my grammar school years. I have recollections definitively. I would say as far back as second grade, guaranteed, if not first grade in kindergarten, in some capacity of being groomed for these programs. Again, I am deciphering my experience through the memories of a child, but through the filter of an adult who now can look back with greater intelligence and divine out what was really going on, because unfortunately at the time the adults in the room were lying to me.
That's pretty common with these programs. Even if you're an adult, they're lying to you.
Absolutely. And as a child, I remember going through these experiences, but it was only up until recently that I could start to make sense of them, because I just carried them around as memories of times and events of things that made no sense. there was no logic to what was going on in those rooms from the perspective that I maintained at the time. The questions were nonsense. The descriptions of what was going on were disingenuous. So all I knew once I entered that room was that, I mean, everything's just kind of BS, and I knew it got me out of class. And there was, there were some cool aspects to it for being a, growing kid, I guess you would say, and a curious mind, I guess, in that capacity is what I'm getting at. It was still intriguing, the activity. One of the devices that they had that we would look into to do the training, where we would have to view questions, they would put headphones on us, and they would sometimes, read us questions, and we would have to then look at the screen and visually pick out the answer, which is very interesting to me. Besides the oddity of all the training, this machine, I was very intrigued by it. I spent a lot of time in there really ignoring what they were getting at, paying attention to this machine and wanting to figure out how does it work, because I'm apparently looking at the answer and it knows that, and I just thought that was the coolest thing ever, being a kid in the early 80s. But I would still go there, and they would do what they had to do. And the first thing that happened when I would walk in would be that I would sit down, and they would have an attendant, and she would tell you to put your head back and put a paper napkin in the corner of your eye, and then ask you all nicely and sweetly to stay still and don't get it on your uniform because it'll stain and you'll get in trouble. And I mean, that all made sense. It was a Catholic school, so again, don't mess up your uniform, you'll get in deep trouble. So you just listen, you tilt your head back, you stay still. They put eye drops in. I have no idea what was in those eye drops, but I can tell you that upon departing the library, this was one of the perks. I enjoyed that the big glass wall window at the south-facing side of the school would be all lit up, and if I got out of that library fast enough, I would have some time to kill before the eye drops wore off. And in that area, the lighting, everything, it was like wearing yellow sunglasses. If I was to just put yellow sunglasses on, and everything was in a massive yellow filter. And I used to think that was really cool.
I can see how a kid would think that was cool, yeah.
Yeah, and I was trusting everyone in that room, so I had no reason to think anything was the matter, I guess. It was just extremely peculiar and made no sense. So I couldn't even make sense of it enough to make it a problem.
Does your adult self look back on this and see altered consciousness or just altered vision?
I would call it altered understanding. Okay. I think I see exactly the same thing that I saw then. It's just I have a keener understanding of what was actually going on in that room.
Yeah, you were being used, obviously.
Oh, absolutely. I was absolutely being used for what the programs eventually get to a term called AMP, anomalous mental phenomenon. And basically, what the CIA learned is that people do have the capacity to know something without them having an ability to know how you knew it. And what they did not do was get bogged down in trying to explain this process, to define the process. They did not care. They just wanted to use the process. It would be like if somebody handed you the keys to the car, instead of just, popping the hood and figuring out how it worked and asking questions and learning stuff about it, they just got in and drove. That's it. They figured out this thing works. We're not going to question it. We're just going to drive this thing. And that's what the programs were doing back then.
As part of my own disclosure process, I'm going to ask you, were your parents aware of this, and did they sign consent forms?
I have spoken to my father on this topic, and he has said that he is not aware of it. He said that he has not signed a consent form for anything that I discussed with him in the details of what was going on in that library. And he apologized. He said that he was sorry that he didn't know that it was going on, and I'll take him for his word on it. I have no reason to disbelieve him. my father's an honest man, if he's anything.
I can understand that, but I wanted the listeners to know that this was a project that they did not bother to ask parental consent, even though they were using eye drops. They were using a chemical substance on children without parental consent.
It happens.
Oh,
There
yeah.
were children in that room.
Yeah, that's part of my process. Is I'm wanting the public to know that these various governmental agencies and also RANDs are using our children as a resource without bothering to get parental consent, and that it's been going on a long time. You're obviously an adult now, so
Yes.
Can you give like the years that you were in elementary school?
Yes, that would have been the time period that we'd be looking at the Monroe Institute stuff would have been, give or take, say, 80, 81-ish to 89.
Okay. So the audience now has a time frame for when we have eyewitness testimony that this took place.
Mhm.
I'm hearing a lot of people complain about eyewitness testimony as not being real, but it's good enough to convict you of murder, so.
Understood. Yeah, I mean, I get all the criticisms that people have, but then, to what end? I mean, what proof are they looking for? I mean, I appreciate that we have to deal with facts instead of fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I mean, what proof are people going to accept? Like you said at the front end, I mean, I tell people all the time, I've been to the South Pole, I've been there for a year. And I mean, literally, people just don't believe me. I mean, what am I supposed to do? Like, fly you there? Like, I mean, I have pictures, I have videos, it's available. I mean, I don't know what to tell people.
I've seen your photographs, I've seen your pay stubs from Raytheon for the time you were there.
Mm-hmm.
You
Stuff
met
in the Navy. I mean, I was.
You met your lady there, and she also has photographs of her being there. And
Yeah, that's true too. I brought my girlfriend back from the South Pole. Am I fibbing?
So it's like, I don't understand what people are wanting, unless it's just they cannot believe it, and so they demand proof, hoping that you won't come up with anything that's definitive. And honestly, I don't think at that point that they're even listening anymore.
I can't believe it myself, Penny. I mean, literally coming from the direction of being where I've been and then coming across folks like you and the stories that you have, I can't believe it either, because I have so many connections. It's like absurd. It looks absurd.
Yeah, when we spent that week together, we had so many points in common that I think you were a little scared.
Yes, this is it's frustrating to me because I don't want any of this to be true. I wish I didn't have to fight this fight. That's a reality. It's not fun at all. There's
No,
nothing
it's not.
there's nothing redeeming about this. People give you. I saw Laura Eisenhower making posts about this, and she's dead on. People are giving people heat nowadays for trying to help children that are in harm's way.
Yeah, they are.
That blows my mind. I am simply just trying to let people know, hey, you know what? I had a pretty rough childhood. It carried over into my adulthood. I'd like to stop it at the beginning where kids are getting harmed and just nip it in the butt. That's where I'm at.
That's where I'm at too. Nip it in the bud at the beginning. Stop.
Yep.
Stop the kidnapping.
Yeah, so all I can really do is just start explaining to people my experiences, my path that I've gone down, which is a weird one. I've been involved in some terrible programs. I've been to some odd spots on the planet, and I started to connect the dots and have to work backwards. And in the process, I'm just doing it in real time. I mean, I respect everybody who's really organized, can sit down and put their thoughts to paper and write a book, and they're gonna make everything nice and simple. I don't know how to do that. That's not my skill set. I work with hand tools and power tools and heavy equipment. I fix things that are broken and leaky and arcing and sparking and smoking.
Oh, I need to explain to the audience. Eric Hecker is a plumber, and that was why his skills were necessary in Antarctica. It's because everybody has plumbing, and when you're dealing with sub-zero temperatures, the plumber becomes incredibly important.
Yep. Everybody likes water. Not everybody likes ice.
So, yeah, never underestimate the blue collar guy, because blue collar guys are who made our civilization possible. Plumbers, bricklayers, electricians, carpenters. Without them, we would not have a civilization.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone who disses them is foolish.
I just like fixing things, and I like that my skill set has afforded me to work in a lot of various places. I remember as a young aspiring apprentice plumber, one of the mechanics I was training under, he said to me that if you get really good at this, kid, you can take this anywhere in the world. And that's become apparently very true, and maybe more so. I'm trying to figure it all out.
Yeah, we had plumbers in space. I remember them. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, plumbing is necessary for civilization. And okay, the next thing that I wanted to ask you about is you've done some research. You started with Tesla and Wardenclyffe and found some interesting things in that particular neighborhood.
I want to take a 2-second pause. I'm noticing my power dropping, and I just need to move my cord to another outlet.
Okay.
You want to break the show or just wait 5 seconds?
Just wait 5 seconds.
You got it. Give me 2 seconds.
Mr. Hecker lives in Alaska, so it's summer there, and when I was there, I can testify that the sun really does never set in the summer.
Yeah, it hangs a very long time.
Okay, so my question was about Wardenclyffe and its neighborhood. What have you found there with your research?
Wardenclyffe was the area that Tesla deemed important for his work. And he had stated that there are many places on the world that are more advantageous to working with energy than other areas. So this was an area that he tapped and said, very important area to work with energy. And I would say that he was right, and that nobody has ever really proven him wrong, because ever since he showed up there, it's the only thing that's ever been going on. He had the Wardenclyffe Tower. Right next door to his facility was the Shoreham nuclear power plant that got installed for a short period of time, but I would say that was a twisted piece of history as well, because it never really seemed to get up and running, even though the local people paid for it to a private corporation. Long story short, they didn't want a nuclear reactor on Long Island after it was built, so they turned it off. But now across the street, there's an area called Brookhaven National Laboratories, also a very interesting place. They moved the reactor across the street, so they apparently can have a reactor on Long Island. You just can't give the people power with it. You can just do crazy science stuff that the CIA doesn't want to talk about in their CIA energy facility.
Why can't they do both?
Because they need the power for their experiments.
Uh,
It was a bait and switch, basically. They got the people to think they were going to get a power plant, and then they created a hubbub when it was ready to rock, and they made the people say they don't want it anymore. So then the corporation that built it said, well, since you guys don't want it and we already built it, you're going to have to pay for it. So they increased everybody's bill. Oop, did I lose you?
I'm still here. I don't
Oh,
know.
okay. Something changed on my screen. I'm sorry. Thought I lost you. Hearing
Katie?
someone else.
Richard, Linda.
The people there.
Hi, Linda.
This is not Linda. You're on the wrong show.
Oh, okay. I put in the numbers that I needed to. All right.
That show is over, and you're on another show.
Facebook. Yeah. And I called the number that I needed to, and I needed to put in the ID, which I did. And I'm sorry, I got the wrong show.
You're interrupting
right.
the live show.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Well, that's the first time I've had that happen.
Interesting. I still think I'm having power troubles, Penny, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm checking.
Well, we do have issues every time we do something.
Yeah, they don't like us talking.
I've noticed that. That was why we had to fly up to be with you, was because
Yeah, more or less to actually have a real conversation.
because of all the interruptions.
Mhm.
So this is like par for the course for us.
Get it all dialed in.
Well, you're back and
I'm charging. Whoop, whoop.
almost in focus. So yeah, okay.
10-4.
So this one's going to be interesting online. Welcome back.
So we were discussing the
We were discussing Wardenclyffe and
Brookhaven National Labs area.
and the nuclear power plant that together sort of make a triangle.
Yeah, more or less. It's they're very close proximity. I mean, you're talking maybe a mile or so from each other in a triangle, almost exactly how you said. Mhm.
So
But those
Yeah.
facilities, so now the Brookhaven National Labs facility was interesting because I kept seeing it come up in the CIA programs way back when. They had what they called the mid-career course. And that course seemed to always take the students for events to Brookhaven National Labs. And the term students I'm using loosely because it seems to be both agents from our country and agents from other countries.
or people they're recruiting to be agents.
Or people they're recruiting to be agents or to work with them. I'm not 100% sure of the content of the mid-career course. I can only tell you the places that they ship the students to.
I have a friend in Australia who was recently invited by Facebook to join a group that the title of it was basically mid-career course. So Facebook is no longer even subtle about being a CIA front.
Mhm. Yeah.
So things happen.
Mm-hmm.
So do you know anything about what's being done at Brookhaven? Because I looked at a photo of it, and hell, I can bring that up on share screen. Give me a minute.
I do know that when I was still running service calls on Long Island, you saw my library. I discussed some of the details on that. So I used to have this interesting activity that would occur very regularly back when people would have called me a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist. But regardless, I have a pile of books that prove veracity of my statements.
Yes, you do.
I would look into things and get a phone call from somebody claiming to be a customer. I would show up to their home. They would have a faucet that was old that they needed repaired. And then in the process, we would have an amazing conversation about the thing that I was researching the day before on my computer. And they would hand me a stack of books on the topic and explain to me a whole bunch of cool things about physics or whatever it is that I was looking at. And they would give me an education and say things like, "Hi, my name's Jim. I work at Brookhaven National Labs at the light source," wink, wink. And the light source is the projects. That's the reactor. And these are the conversations that I would have with people.
I have similar conversations with people, but they're not quite as in my face.
Yeah. And they would be like, "You were looking into this, and I have some books here that would help you. Have a great day." And I'd be like, "Thanks, Jim. Call me if you have a problem with your faucet."
Okay.
But what do I do with that? It would happen all the time. And I have tons of books because apparently people wanted me to know things.
Okay. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Okay. So I can't share the photo. But from the photo, Brookhaven Labs is built in a circle.
One of those facilities, yep.
And it greatly resembles the smaller portion of the CERN facility.
Oh, it totally is. It is a particle accelerator. They have one. They have a circular and a linear.
So that was the big question I was going to ask, is if it was a particle accelerator.
Oh yeah, they have stuff there that they admit to, and then there's stuff there that I question. If they've actually shut down the linear accelerator and just made it bigger.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's another linear accelerator somewhere in the Chicago area. Whether it's in Illinois or Michigan, I'm not sure.
I mean, if you look at the map and you look where Brookhaven is, and you look at Montauk Point, and you look at the lighthouse, you have the original lighthouse that Washington commissioned. But slightly further out, a couple of buildings away, is a rectangular white building that is, they call it Coast Guard or military, they call it like a lookout spot. But it's just this white tower that comes up and has like a window on just the top floor, basically. It's almost like concrete itself. Like a periscope or something coming out of the ground, you might say. So, if you were to draw a line from Brookhaven to Montauk Point, and you could potentially have a linear accelerator underground, and you just needed to redirect it up 90 degrees and then back down 90 degrees to that other plane and redirect it, I mean, you could start having energy weapons running the length of Long Island, would be one conversation people could discuss.
Well, I know from my own experience that in 1964 there was a device that was made to resemble an elevator in a building on the other end of Long Island, the end closest to New York City. And so in 1964, that particular device took me to Mars in 20 minutes. And it was a wormhole. So, a constructed wormhole.
That was one of the stories that I shouldn't say that's a common theme that I've heard from some of the other SSP vets that has shown up in my experience. And these are some of the stuff that's shocking to me. I have on a fistful of occasions that I can remember very clearly, again, showing up in the capacity as a plumber to make a repair to a building on Long Island that I know has, I guess you would say, rich association with the military industrial complex. But I would do these facilities for repairs, and I would show up and take what I noticed as extremely long elevator rides down. And
Yeah.
what happened, and it was just like, oh my God, like this is like, and at the time, I mean, I just took it as, all right, keep your mouth shut. It's probably some top secret thing or something like that. But who knows what else was going on? And I mean, in hindsight now, and hearing stories from folks like you and other people, it's like, I don't imagine that visit was as simple as I recall it, that I just walked in and walked out.
Usually there's an encounter with a mind wipe device.
Yeah.
So,
I remember a lot of the going down part in the elevator, to be honest. I don't remember so much of the repair work or the return.
yeah. There's a lot of things that I remember going and I remember coming back, and the stuff in between is so fuzzy that I don't even talk about those things, because the coherent memory is so small that it's not worth discussing. So
Yeah, some of the details in and of themselves, to anybody else, I mean, they almost mean nothing. But it's in my head where I can correlate these things and put them together and go, you know what, I didn't think that made sense until this started to make sense, and this started to make sense, and now that gives that some weight, and now that matters. So now I have to consider that new information, and how does that pertain to this over here? And it's just this comedy of errors of a perspective of my past that is just, it's ridiculous at this point to look back and be like, how did this happen? How did I get to all these spots? And
So we're back to the Men in Black movie with their memory erase gun.
yeah. I mean,
Look at the light.
we're learning more and more about these sciences, and I believe that's one of the things that is very telling. A lot of people want to laugh and say, oh, the flashy light, the memory tools and wiping memories, but this is the battlefield of the mind, is where we are at nowadays. The neurosciences and neuroweapons, that's the battlefield of the future, and this is where the research and development has been going on for decades, where folks like myself and you and others have been negatively impacted and basically thrown to the wolves, just so that they can figure out what they could potentially do to other people in the future.
Well, on those lines, they started, as far back as I can track, these programs actually started under the OSS rather than the CIA.
Yes, that is correct.
So they
predecessor.
They were ongoing since World War I.
Mm-hmm.
So the further I dig into historical documents, the further back I can place the beginnings of these programs. But it's been an ongoing situation, and when you look into the legalities, if they invoke national security, the government has the legal right to do testing on the civilian population without informing the population.
Yep.
And some of the tests, like when they were testing LSD, they gave it to the prostitutes and then also their Johns. And they didn't follow up on the effects of the LSD on the Johns, only on the prostitutes. And the prostitutes thought that their job was to get information out of these men. They knew they were being recorded. The men did not. So they were doing that Cold War era, 1960s.
Yep. I think people, again, and so that was the tech at the time, right? That was the tech that was available.
That was the tech they were investigating at the time.
Well, it was the tech that was available, and yes, they were using it, is basically the point that I'm getting at. Is, so I would say, following that logic, let's look at what tech is available today, and then consider, would they do that? Would they use it? And I would just say, it's par for the course. Everywhere we look in history, every time you do an investigation and you say, what did they have available to do? Oh, and it turned out they did it. I don't think that you're going to find many circumstances where nefarious people have the opportunity to do bad and like, you know what? We shouldn't do that.
That's a major problem in science research.
Right.
Anyway,
Yep.
is, oh, we figured out we can do this, and nobody ever stops to say, should we?
Right. That's not how science works.
Nope.
It's almost aside from morals. And I'm not justifying it or I'm not yaying or naying it. I'm just saying that's been my observation.
So if they have the ability to do something, they do it. And if it's not legal, they hide that they did it.
Or if it turns out in time they learn that they shouldn't have done it for whatever reason, they'll just wash it away. Like, you know, oh, it was in the name of science.
Now, I'm finding that a lot of the mind control programs,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we're talking more MK Ultra types, that those were actually done in the 1800s and then repeated in the mid 1900s because they didn't believe the data. They didn't think, oh, those people were 100 years ago. They couldn't possibly know what they're talking about.
Let's see, I heard someone, I think it might have been Tony Rodriguez I heard use these terms, so I'm plagiarizing, I apologize, but thanks for helping me out, Tony. I think he was the one that I heard say this, the difference between technique and technology, and that might be a better way for people to use their brains on this one. So now we're discussing technology contemporarily and how this can be used in the battlefield of the mind through neuro weapons and tech. But you could accomplish the same thing in antiquity through technique.
Yes.
And there were practices and rituals and knowledge that the human mind could be programmed, deprogrammed, reprogrammed, erased. All kinds of things could be done through technique.
Yes. And my generation, I was initially kidnapped in 1959. So my generation was the first one that I have tracked where they switched from technique to technology.
Gotcha.
So what they did to me were techniques, but they used technology to rebuild me after the techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And so they didn't use ritual, but they used the practice that was part of the ritual.
Yep.
For somebody who's sitting there going, what the fuck did she just say? Yes, we can cuss on this network. Okay, you've heard about the satanic ritual abuse, where they're in the middle of this ritual, and there's an altar, and they've got somebody dead on it, and they've got you kneeling in front of it, and they literally terrorize you because you know the person who came into this room before you is on the altar dead, and they are raping you. This is the technique. The technology does the same thing through a virtual reality device, and your body's never actually touched. Mine, it was this man would come into the room and rape me. No ritual whatsoever. So I'm in the in-between. So I was 4 years old, and they started with drowning me, proceeded to rape, proceeded to sodomy. They nailed me inside walls and left me to suffocate. It's really nasty shit they did to me. And my understanding is that today they do all of that through virtual reality, where they never actually touch your body. But your mind is still fractured because at the time you believe it's real. So they have switched from the satanic ritual techniques, and they weren't always satanic, because a lot of Christian groups use their own exorcism rituals that accomplish the same thing. So I don't want to be saying that anybody out there is innocent. I'm not going to trust any child entrusted to me to anyone out there, not any religious group, because at this point, once I started expressing altars, I was subjected to ongoing exorcism. It was a once a week, regularly scheduled exorcism for 2 years, when I finally said enough. And at this point, I consider it to be spiritual abuse. And I won't submit to it again.
Mhm.
But it was just as effective as what was done in this at Langley when I was 4. So it's we're off topic.
No, it's all good. It's all still Langley and CIA, and let's not let them do to people what they did to us when we were kids. I mean, so it's still goal-oriented, Penny.
Okay. It's still related.
Yes.
But what I think, there are a hell of a lot more of us out there than people suspect.
Yes, that's one of the things that I want to really let people know, is that the programs, as you and I had gone through them, they don't function that way anymore. But the people that have the intentions that function these types of programs, they still exist, and by some other program. I don't have the answer to that. I'm on the tail of it. I'm tracking it down. I'm trying to find it, because I know there's other people in harm's way and children. So what I do is, like you know, is that the names changes and there is a money trail, and we can track this. I can be honest with you right now. I'm having a hard time tracking it after 1994, because I can see that something severe happened in 1994 and everything changed. Bill Clinton came out, disclosed that all these projects were going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I really can't tell you what happened after 1994 in the programs. I know myself personally, it was a banner year, because it was the year that I was in the Submarine Service, and yeah, that was a screwed up year for me too. And it's a rough spot in history.
1994 was when Bill Clinton apologized to all of us who had been victimized by MK Ultra and had been further victimized by the courts and the medical personnel for reporting it.
Right.
There are people still in prison and mental institutions for reporting MK Ultra in victimization.
Right. And yet it's too.
And yet it's everybody knows it happened, and still these people are still in these institutions, and some of them are so damaged from being in there so long that I'm not sure that they would survive on the outside anymore.
Correct. Yeah, the MK Ultra program is a fierce thing for folks to deal with, and most don't deal with it well at all and don't make it through the program. Folks that do make it through the programs are all seem to be suffering similar circumstances, which is to me also extremely indicative. And then out of that set of folks, there's fewer and far between that are able to collect themselves enough to even sound the warning. And I would say that's where folks like you and I are at.
Mm-hmm.
Folks like Tony, I think, are doing really great work as well in trying to move the agenda forward accomplishing something, to gain ground, to make things better. You know, it's one thing to discuss these things and bring them to light. It's another to do so collectively for the purpose of making things better. I would love to see more of that.
I've personally counseled in the neighborhood of 400 people, starting before I went public. I would never have gone public if they hadn't started shooting at me. I was following Bill Cooper's advice to hide in the spotlight because I was being shot at with energy weapons. But what I practice is called deep listening. And since I have psi abilities, I make a sub-telepathic psi connection to the person and take the pain out of their memories. I don't erase their memories, I don't change their memories, I just take the pain out so that they're not hysterical remembering it.
Interesting.
And so a lot of these people, no one has ever listened to them. They've just told them they were crazy and told them to shut up.
Yep.
Now, out of these 400 people, there have been 5 that I've told them they were delusional. And that they really needed to get a professional, licensed shrink, because they had problems beyond my ability to help them. And yes, I'm responsible enough to tell someone if they're beyond my ability to help them.
That is the right thing to do.
They usually get pissed as hell.
I understand that. I've had a few people reach out to me looking for information, and I truly want to help people every chance that I can, but I also understand there are folks that I'm not the right person for you to be talking to. And I've had a couple of those circumstances, and it's frustrating because I want to help them, and I certainly can see they want help. But I guess I just understand their frustration is just that they really thought that I was going to be able to be that guy, and they're frustrated. You know, now they have to go down the road further and look harder. You know, I didn't have the answer, so I just try to apologize and I guess wash my hands of it without it being too much of an emotional burden on me, because boy, I don't like not fixing things. I want to get things corrected.
Well, the last person that I told her she was delusional had lied to me about a suicide attempt. And then when I had some health issues and couldn't talk to her for 2 weeks, she started going through my friends list telling people that I had abandoned her, and then that I was not good at what I was doing, that I wasn't helping her, and that she was looking for psychic help, and she got the reinforcement of her delusions that she wanted, and she never did go back to the shrink, which is what I had told her to do when she finally showed me photographs of where she had slashed her wrists. And I know that someone who has wounds like that still haven't healed, that's beyond my ability to help.
Right.
That, and it's incompetence if I keep that person. So I told her repeatedly she needed to go back to her shrink.
Yep.
Well, I think we're due for a break.
Oh wow, that went quick.
Miss Katie?
as you walked away. When you think all is forsaken, listen to me now. You need never feel broken again. Sometimes darkness can show you the light. An unforgivable tragedy. The answer isn't where you think you'd find it. Prepare yourself for a reckoning. For when your world seems to crumble again. Don't be afraid, don't turn away. You're the one who can redefine it. Don't let hope become a memory. Let the shadow permeate your mind and reveal the thoughts that were tucked away. So that the door can be opened again. In your darkest memories lies the answer if you dare to find it. Don't let hope become a memory. When you think all is forsaken, listen to me now. You need never feel broken again. Sometimes darkness can show you the don't let another summer pariah consume your soul. You need strengthening, demanding. It takes a minute off to rekindle the fire burning in the air. Ignite the fire within you. When you think all is forsaken, listen to me now. You need never feel broken again. Sometimes darkness can show you the light. Don't ignore, listen to me now. You need never feel broken again. Sometimes darkness can show you the light.
Welcome back to Nacht Waffen Pilot with Penny Bradley and my guest, Eric Hecker. So,
Be back.
we haven't got any questions on the Facebook feed, and YouTube is giving us fits, so we're not on there yet. So,
Does that? Go ahead.
let's continue with Long Island.
You got it. Let's see. So we had broached the Brookhaven issue. Another thing in that area that is a lesser known fact of our nation and Long Island. You had mentioned the OSS before.
Mm-hmm.
This goes along with Operation Paperclip. Right at that transitional period that the OSS was turning into the CIA was the time that we were functionally bringing former Nazis over through Operation Paperclip. And what I'm finding is that we were putting them all over Long Island, specifically an area now known as Yaphank, where there was a place, an area known as Camp Upton, which is also another name for the Brookhaven Wardenclyffe area. Camp Upton is where they had Camp Siegfried, which was
Siegfried?
Correct. Camp Siegfried.
The real Siegfried was one of the Merovingian kings who married an Ostrogoth and then made war on the rest of the Merovingians alive then.
Okay.
So he's an interesting character.
There are many photos available online. If you just do an image search for Camp Siegfried, Long Island, and you will see the amount of Nazi activity that was going on there post-World War II. It was basically where they brought everyone. It was advertised that these German scientists, Operation Paperclip folks, they were living in an area in New York called New Rochelle. And then they would take the train. There's pictures you can see where they were trying to get them to take the Long Island Railroad all the way out to Camp Siegfried and enjoy all the festivities of the Fuhrer and all of the fun things that went along, if you were a post-World War II Bund participant. And I've since learned that my grandfather was in the Bund and would go to Camp Siegfried and mingled with the Operation Paperclip folks. This is, again, part of my experience and my depth and breadth of what was going on Long Island, is that, it turns out my family was involved with this stuff, and I'm finding wild facts and proofs in my own family line. You say that, bloodlines matter. I'm learning that
Bloodlines do indeed matter. And
there's veracity to this,
And there are a lot of folks that don't know what bloodline they are and have no idea why certain things are happening to them that are bloodline related.
And I can appreciate that maybe my father didn't know something. I don't know if my grandfather knew something or not. But what I could divine out of how this stuff seems to work is that someone gave permission somewhere. Just because our perspective is short-sighted and we think that it should have been from my parent on that day that it occurred, it doesn't mean that some other permission in my family wasn't granted previously.
That's
and
true.
A lot of people may not like the sounds of that, but that's also a reality that some people are going to have to deal with.
When they bring one person over, they often consider their offspring to be theirs.
I agree that I have seen things that suggest that, and that would be where my brain goes, but I haven't seen anything that proves that statement yet, but I believe that once a family member gets themselves obligated, you're going to find yourself challenged to get disconnected.
In these 400 or so people that I've been counseling over the last 5 years, there are certain commonalities. And if someone comes to me and does not fit those commonalities, I wonder how real their memories are, because they become an anomaly by not having these things. And so the commonalities in background, okay, we say Merovingian descent is one of them, but there are more details to it. It's not just anyone of Merovingian descent. It can be anyone whose ancestry is involved with the secret societies, any of them. And I've identified 30 of them so far, and I have the impression that I've only scratched the surface. So I run across people whose family were CIA, their family were military officers. Being a draftee doesn't seem to count, but if they were officer class or master sergeants, yeah, that counts. My stepdad was a master sergeant, but that was after I was an adult. He worked in the construction of atomic weapons, and he said, I was a supervisor in a factory that made these things, And if I tell you anything more, I'm going to have to kill you. So we never asked. So I'm just stating, you know, my mother swears that I'm going to get her in trouble because I'm talking about all this stuff. Well, I'm sorry. I have no information about what my stepdad did other than that one statement that he supervised in a factory and that he was chosen because he was sterile and that the radiation would not affect any offspring. So, I mean, like that is going to get her arrested. But she's completely paranoid that me talking is going to get her arrested. So I'm thinking that that's her particular programming coming up because she has alters. So she has obviously been through some sort of trauma-based mind control.
All that.
So I'm not angry with her, but I don't make contact with her because she's so difficult.
I am finding that I am becoming way more of a forgiving human being as I'm learning more about myself and how I've been exposed to these programs, because now I'm looking around and I'm seeing the symptoms in others, and it's making me way more forgiving. I used to be more frustrated when people, I guess, were getting frustrated or having hard times, or you know the drill. But now I'm becoming more aware of these programs and the impact that it has on people, what it causes, these trigger events, these alters and stuff. And now I spend more time walking around and just observing and watching people flash before my eyes and watching them react to things uncontrollably, completely out of their own control. It's like watching sharks' eyes roll in the back of their head. They have no control over how they're going to react to some of these things. And
they have absolutely no control, and some of them are just completely bizarre things.
Yes, absolutely. And this is, to me, where I'm starting to try to let people know that these programs have obviously moved into another direction.
There's somebody that's messing with more people.
Yes, folks like you and I are no longer in the eye of the storm, so to say. We're garbage, we're waste as far as these programs are concerned.
Well, I was still being taken as recently as June.
Oh, understood. I'm talking like relatively. We're not anywhere near primary mission anymore. We're more on the side of like departments that are in cleanup processes. You know.
I had an ability that they're still having trouble producing. So. They are still having trouble producing people who can go into other dimensions and take physical objects with them.
Totally understood.
They're having trouble with that particular ability, and so I am still relevant.
Yes, you are still relevant. But they have, I guess, moved on to bigger fish is basically all I'm getting at. You know,
they have more programs.
Yeah, and they have more, for them, more fun. They have more brains to mess with on a grander scale. So on their intentions are just, I guess, grander. They've broadened their horizons. You know, now it's the majority of people in the population that are getting targeted by things that are the offspring of these programs?
We had a comment on our Facebook feed that's live. Bhaktha Peter said that around 1994 is when Bill Cooper said the Supreme Court made a ruling that the UN Charter trumps the U.S. Constitution when the two are in conflict. So that's interesting with your observation that we can't track these programs since then.
Okay.
So and Bill Cooper had been Navy intelligence, so he would have known.
He certainly knew a lot.
And folks should go back and listen to his his radio show, his interviews, and read his book.
Behold a Pale Horse is probably one of the most important pieces of literature for an open mind to absorb today.
And if you can't find it in print, it is available online as a free PDF. So
He was definitely way ahead of his time.
definitely. He was one of the first official whistleblowers to tell us that the Greys were actually real and that the government knew it. So, yeah. Those of you out there who are under the age of 30, you really need to look at how many people have been blowing the whistle on these programs and for how long. I know that Bill Cooper was one of them. Michael Ralph was one of them. Phil Schneider was one. This is a very large community that goes back, to the end of World War II. And then you have sightings before that. But there are lots of testimonies out there. And one by itself does not a movement make. But there are hundreds of people now who have come forward. And some have been killed for their testimonies. Bill Cooper was executed for telling us that Osama bin Laden was not behind 9/11. So
this is kind of where that issue for me with the proofs gets like challenging, because it's like here we have so many people that have provided a very solid link for the chain, so to say. And, everybody, that's what they want. They want links in the chains and make all of the connections. But when people provide you solid links for the chain, and you then basically refuse to connect them or see the connection or tolerate the possibility of the connection and just leave them all as links on the floor, I mean, that's just choosing to live in ignorance.
I think it's programming.
Yeah, something, you're right. There is a certain amount of programming that is valuable in that as well. And that is what we're seeing contemporarily, is that it's no longer that they necessarily have to, drag you in somewhere and beat the information that they want in your head into you. There's more subtle ways, but they can absolutely get that information into your head.
There's a lot of subliminal programming in regular television, cable versions, even mainstream media that's online. There's a lot of subliminal programming in there.
I think people don't even understand subliminal, so to say. More fair way I would put it, more appropriate, would be suggestion. And this is the art of magic, the art of presentation. This is, there was a YouTube video recently I watched. It was called Influencing the Influencer. And basically this magician took 3 content creators and did this wonderful magic trick on them where he basically made these 3 people take the picture that he wanted them to through the power of suggestion, which some people would say is subliminal programming. But yet it's very functional. It's not technology. It's just a technique. And it's timeless.
There are a lot of techniques that are very, very ancient. And there is a class of our society that they are taught these techniques from childhood. And so those techniques have also been used on them, just like they were used on me.
Yes.
And so part of me is angry at them that they're manipulating the public the way they are, and another part of me realizes they went through the same shit that I did.
Yes.
And that part of me wants some sort of mercy, because they don't know any better. They don't know anything else.
Yep.
And I'm looking at this and going, the crimes have to stop. Now, for the public, the crimes involve kidnapping and torturing small children. That has to stop. Period.
Yep. I know.
The only issues that I have is what are we going to do to these people to stop it?
I know of yourself and a fistful of other people that have mentioned things like the shock cages, which is not a very fun topic, but it is a reality of our past in a society that we need to make corrections for. And I've heard other people talk about these things, and these are the things.
The shock cages were at Montauk.
Correct. So these are the things that people need to be aware of, the extent of the horrors. I mean, so, you know, you're taking Nazi war criminals that were experimenting on men, women, and children, and then we brought them over here under the false pretense of science, and then
they handed children
all over again.
We handed children to them.
Yes, we handed them checkbooks and children so that they can continue what they were doing.
And not all of them that worked on me were Nazis.
Understood.
But I want to make it clear, there were ETs in the room on more than one occasion. The ETs were not who harmed me, it was the humans. And the humans alone. And there were times that the ETs actually rescued me from the humans. And so from my point of view, the humans are worse than anything out there. And I've been accused of being a traitor to humanity because of that. And I'm sorry, it's the truth as I know it. And there will be things that I will say that people don't like, but they're based on my truth. So I've had a lot of New Agers argue with me that various ETs are nothing but demons, but at the same time, I know that one of those races was who saved my life at Montauk. So, you know.
That was an interesting thing for me to learn as well, was that I was also apparently salvaged from the MK Ultra program by outside forces. That it wasn't my own kind that helped me. It was my own kind that was hurting me, and apparently it was outside forces that came to give me assistance as well. And these are, I mean, these are challenging things to deal with, you know. But
it goes against anything that you were taught in religious training. I know you went to a Catholic school, so I'm sure you had religious indoctrination. I was
old school.
I was raised in the Church of Christ, and my father was the minister. So he was not only my dad, but he was my religious authority. And he was fanatic even for them. And so I had so much religious indoctrination that it wasn't until my remember code was used on me that I actually broke that. So I was this Christian religious fanatic right up until the year 2000. I was finally excommunicated in 2004. So
yeah,
that was the one that took.
The religious aspect to me, I mean, yes, you are absolutely right. They did due diligence to try to indoctrinate me into Roman Catholicism. The problem was the ringer that they were putting us through. I mean, I was not a dumb kid. I could see the hypocrisy of everything that I was being presented. We had pedophiles in the mix. I was going to this crazy library situation. There was shit going down in my school, for lack of a better term, that wasn't very Christian-like, you know. So I mean, my whole entire life, I always have said to people that 13 years of Catholic school teaches you to not want to be Catholic.
I can see that. I went to public schools in California during the era when we had the Bracero program. So they had Mexican nationals who were allowed in just to harvest crops. And they would be allowed in, and they would work from basically March until October, November, when the rains started. And so their children that they brought along, because they had no one to leave them with, mom and dad both worked the fields, and in the summer so did the older kids. And so these kids were basically only in school from late October until March, when the fruit season started. And because my father was part Cherokee and looked it, actually the teachers thought he was Hispanic. And so once they saw him, they would place me with the Bracero kids. So I learned right away what racism was. And I learned right away that those kids were my natural allies. And that, so I helped them with their studies. And it wasn't until I was junior high level that my mother finally figured out what I was doing and threw a fit. And to this day, I will still defend the Hispanic kids.
I've always enjoyed rooting for the underdog in any circumstance. I hate watching people get overpowered.
I hate watching people be abused for nothing that they have control over.
Yep. I guess I don't like watching people lose. I hate that look on their face. So I like helping folks and preventing that. Well,
what their parents were doing was absolutely necessary for California agriculture. And our state economy was dependent on them. And yet they were treated like they were trash. They voluntarily came from their country to help ours.
And here you were, a child, being taught this by adults, and it's very unfortunate.
And so, you know, the dichotomy between what I was taught on Mars by the Germans and then what I was taught in California by both what they taught in the school and by what I saw being practiced. The dichotomy was so different. And as an adult, I found that maybe half of what I was taught in California schools was actually objectively truth. I've been going through and checking what I remember being taught in Shula on Mars. And 90% of it is objectively truth.
I find a lot of the stuff that you talk about your schooling, the Shula, and when you talk about the Nacht Waffen mentality, this Teutonic mentality is intriguing to me because it seems very comfortable. I feel very much that I was raised in a similar fashion, because when you tell stories and say things and put things the way that you do, it just, to me, is like, well, yeah, I mean, that's, you know, that's how kids get raised, right? And then I think, well, I guess maybe not, but apparently I was raised that way, but I guess apparently other people were raised differently. But this the way that you describe the regimen, so to say, that whole, I guess, to me, it's just commonplace, but Germans are very organized and regimented, and so was my life in my childhood. And when you say it like it's a Nacht Waffen thing or a Schule thing or a Teutonic thing, as if other people aren't like it. It makes me laugh because it's the only thing that I know, and then I laugh because it's like, well, oh, okay, so I guess there's another way of doing things.
It's very, very different from California public schools.
Mm-hmm.
At least the public schools in the 60s and 70s. And my father had a temper, and he would get fired at work, and we would move a lot. So I went to 36 different schools in the California system I started kindergarten in 1960, and I graduated high school in 73. And then I did junior college and graduated in 3 semesters and got married, and then had to wait for him to have as many units as I did because he had ego issues, and then went to San Diego State. So I got sick while I was there. I was working in a biology lab and caught a virus. And this was before the ADA. And so I was literally kicked out of school because they were afraid I was going to sue them for catching a virus in their lab. So that's one of the things that real super soldiers and secret space program project people have in common is approximately 20 years after they are sent home from their first however long they're taken, because it can be 20, it can be 40, it can be 50, it can be 60 years. My first one was 55 years. So you're looking at something about the process they use to send us back gives us an autoimmune disorder. Now, mine was triggered early by that virus I caught at San Diego State, but only 2 years early. So if you're looking at someone in their 40s and they're not sick, they're not real.
Well, I don't know about that one, Penny.
No. I don't feel you were necessarily out in space.
Understood.
Okay.
I don't know on that one yet either.
Now, I'm not saying that this is my criteria for vetting people.
Mm-hmm.
The younger people, they're taking them like 18, 19, 20, maybe as late as 25. They're putting them through a separate process where they take them repeatedly at night for training, for mind control, and they're using virtual reality. I have friends who know their children are involved in this because the kids get up in the morning and talk about secret spy school. Okay. Personally, I would be shitting bricks, but this was shared with me privately that this one person's kids are getting up in the morning and talking about secret spy school. And first it was the boy, and now it's also the girl. And so, this is something people also need to know. It's a family affair. If they take one, they take the kids, they take the grandkids.
Has to do with frequencies, and a lot of folks don't understand those technologies, but a bloodline has a frequency to it. And it just is something that, I mean, it's just like tuning a radio and any other equipment. Once they get it dialed in, it's dialed in. It's just that simple.
I've had people question me because I don't want to take a chip.
Mm-hmm.
I don't use a cell phone because it is an electronic leash.
Mm-hmm.
And yet at the same time, I admit these programs have my personal frequency and can track me anywhere in the solar system.
Understood. Mm-hmm.
But the dichotomy confuses people.
Yeah.
Well, and it's like, I'm already being tracked. Why would I add to it? What, I can't do anything about them tracking my frequency because that's the frequency of my body. But I'm not going to cooperate with being tagged like an animal.
Right. Mm-hmm. Because certainly if you don't need to utilize the conveniences of that noose around your neck, there's no reason to put the noose around your neck if it has no benefit to you. A lot of people are walking around with this noose on their neck because they'll spout to you all of the benefits that it has, but they won't identify it as a noose on their neck. Because if you try to take those benefits away from them, they'll come at you clawing, telling you why they need that noose on their neck.
They're addicted to it.
Yeah.
And I'll admit social media is addicting.
It's designed to be.
And I'm older. I'm disabled. I have mobility issues. I mean, you saw them while I was at your place. I can do limited stuff, but when I reach my limit, it's nap time.
Fully understood. And the world has been modified around us, again, by design. People are utilizing these systems, these programs, these Facebook things, and these other apps to fill the void that was created by breaking up society's face-to-face interactions. We're seeing it contemporarily. I mean, literally, I just said breaking up face-to-face interactions. I'm sorry, there's a mask issue going on in the world right now that kind of supports where I'm at.
Oh, yeah.
They're trying to break up face-to-face interactions. I'll say it. I'll be so bold as to say there are people with bad intentions that don't want humans interacting on a human level. It's that simple.
There are some countries that are trying to make sex illegal.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting to a level of profound ridiculousness. If you can't tell that there are bad people, the minority, working against the good people, which are the majority, and that united we stand and divided we fall. If you can't see that this game is going on, then the psyops are working perfectly. You're the end result of these programs functioning.
Well, I'm looking at it. There are a lot of people for whom my information is not appropriate. And people who cannot see through the obvious psyops in our face are some of those people.
Right.
And I've taken the attitude of someone who is hostile, who says I can't be trusted, who says I'm a traitor to humanity. Those people are not appropriate for my information. And if
not everybody's going to get it, and not everybody's mind even is able to process it. They don't necessarily have the experiences in their background, the path that they walked. I mean, there's conversations that you could have with someone. They don't have the vocabulary or the vernacular. They're not familiar with it in any way, shape, or form. And I've spoken to this about years ago with a friend of mine in New York when we started down the rabbit hole, so to say. And we said, you know something? It sure looks like that this big body of lies was designed to be so big and distasteful that the split second somebody starts to try to digest it, it's not palatable. It's designed to be a disgustingly large amount of untruths that you start to uncover. And when people go down this road, they turn tail and run because of the horror that they find is the truth.
The horror is pretty thick, and I'm now on layer 9 of the rabbit hole, and every time I think I've gotten to the end of the lies and the deliberate deceits, there will be a chunk of the floor fall through, and I'll find a whole new layer. Now, we are getting towards the end of our time, so so this is the time where you get to do share your stuff.
Oh, you got it.
How to get a hold of you.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you and this channel for hosting us and giving me the opportunity. I think this is a really cool format. Correct me if I'm wrong, we do have the possibility to take live callers on this?
We have the possibility to take live callers, yes.
That could be a lot of fun. I hope that we get to use that in the future. But since you gave me the floor for what I am doing, if folks would like to follow along, my name is Eric J. Hecker, and I'm trying to get things figured out for myself and for others. I have a YouTube page and a Facebook page. Both of them are titled Deciphering My Experience. And I am doing work to try to uncover where I've been and figure out what I know and how it helps others in the community. And hopefully we can all just make some connections to better ourselves and to better others. It matters.
It does matter. For those who are unable to listen to this live, it will be posted both on the network's channel and on mine, which is Penny Bradley, Nacht Waffen pilot, spelled German. And our producer, Katie Camara, has her own show following, and it's called Goddesses and Devils with Katie Camara and Amanda McManus. And they're going to be talking about the mind of a serial killer. I don't know if they have a guest or not, but that sounds interesting. So.
Ooh, and I did just remember I have an email. If you want to reach out, you can just email me at decipheringme369@gmail.com.
Thank you. Thank you much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Penny. I always love chatting with you, and I hope that we can do more of these. I look forward to everything that you're doing in the community with your channels. I see things are growing, and thank you for coming up and visiting, because I've been dealing with the Adams Center up here, and although they have a very busy schedule, they want me to talk and talk and talk at their facility, which I think is great, because you definitely struck a chord up here and got people's interest going. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I haven't uploaded my copies of the recordings yet. I'm keeping to our agreement to wait till September.
No worries. We're right around the corner.
Yeah, we are. And for my listeners, I want to thank everyone who has followed my YouTube, because I just broke the magic 1,000, which means that I could monetize, except that YouTube doesn't like my heavy metal music. So I'll be honest, they don't. So,
well, congratulations on your milestone.
Thank you.
And hopefully I can help you push some numbers even higher. I have plenty more to say. This is just the beginning. I'm just trying. I'm glad that you were able to come up and see the paperwork that I had, because I'm aware that people don't like believing things nowadays, but it is what it is. I have a story. I've been where I've been. It is what it is.
People want to find any excuse that they can for what we say to not be true.
Yeah, they want to shove their head back in the sand. They want me to be wrong. I get it.
They want me to be wrong too, and
I want me to be wrong.
I have had people stand nose to nose to me and tell me that I'm just schizophrenic. Mm-hmm. And I just look at them and go, I'm sorry, Alters is dissociative identity disorder. If you're going to diagnose me, get it right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. It's not that simple.
It doesn't mean that what the alters remember is not true.
Right. It's just a different way of storing information in a computer. That's all it really boils down to. It's just you access things differently.
My brain is split up into what we used to call partitions. And some of the partitions share memory and some of them don't. And the ones that do, I'm sharing the story I remember. And as more partitions open up to me, I will be sharing more.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
It is what it is.
Down that path, Penny. I'm making more connections and removing partitions as well. So I think we're definitely on the same page.
That was something that was interesting, was my partner and yours comparing notes on life with someone with alters.
Oh my God, yes. I feel for Holly so much what she has to go through, but she's a champ, and that's why I'm very grateful to have her.
I feel for Lou too. My world is not as it appears from the outside at all.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone who is listening or who will watch the recordings in the future, and we are checking out.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Penny.